Alright, hey guys. I'm back with another track breakdown. This time it's the 8th track off of my most recent album. The track's name is Those Final Moments, and it's my first time ever making drum and bass. So the BPM is 175, it's 4/4 time signature, and the track is written in F harmonic. So we'll begin with the drums, as usual, and it's the very basic drum and bass drum pattern. And that switches to a tighter snare in the second drop. Next we have the one of many, actually, percussion loops, and this one was made out of various percussion samples I found in Audio Tools sample library. And it sounds like this. It also comes with a pulsar delay, which is automated to give it a bit more of a weird metallic effect. It has very slight distortion, and most of its low end is taken out, plus some areas around the 3600 hertz area. Next we have the hats. Sound like this. Okay. Then we have another percussion loop. This one's a sample, and it's just panned all the way to the right. We have a few more percussive loops down here, which I'll get to later. Next, we have the bass part of drum and bass. There's actually two of them that I'm going to cover today. So the first one is actually a little more complicated than I usually make them. And what we have here is a note splitter, which basically treats these three synthesizers as one. And so we have the very solid sawtooth down layer, very gritty, distorted, and it has a very strong pitch modulation. Then we have a much higher pitched layer, and then we have what I assume is a noise layer. And these are all combined together, they're distorted. Some of the low ends removed, given some high mids, one of many fake OTTs. Then we have a second one with its gain increased, more distortion, more low end taken out, very strong boost to the mids, with a low pass automation that comes in handy later. We have an exciter, which is basically just saturation for you non-audio tool people. We have reverb, and we finally have feedback removal. And so that plays a very simple eighth note pattern throughout most of the first drop. It switches every 2 bars to be a triplet pattern, I believe. Yeah, it might be triplets, I don't know. And so that basically repeats throughout the drop. The reverb and the low pass filter come in to add a bit more audible interest. So here's what it sounds like. And then it switches. And so in the second drop, we have actually a much simpler sound. This is just one Heisenberg, and it's what I'm going to describe as a very dry sound. It's very mono. It's just a square wave with a couple of sine waves and then a noise layer, distorted very heavily with a bit of fake OTT, 3 of them to be exact. And then we have high-end removal, and then this. I put a phaser on the mid frequencies, and then I believe that is allowing for a bit more movement. Then it's just the low end removal and a limiter that reduces the volume slightly, and so we get this. And then in the second half, it plays the same pattern as the first bass does in the first drop. Next we have the sub bass, which is rather strong actually, and it's a very typical sub bass. The only notable things about it is it has a bit of saturation applied. It has a very strong pitch modulation. All its high end is removed. It's made mono, and then its gain is reduced in areas that are not at the drop. For example, this midsection, where it plays more solid notes. Next we have something called the saw layer, which is just a simple sawtooth down paired with a square wave, pitched down an octave. It plays very short notes, and it has some slight pitch modulation. It has 3 OTTs on it, a chorus for added width, feedback removal. It's made very much stereo and pans to the back, and it has its low end taken out, so it sounds like this. It gets more important in the second drop when its sustain level is increased, so it's able to play actual solid notes, and it plays these chords. And then in the second half of the drop, it swaps between playing those chords and then playing the pattern from the first drop. So these automations are just switching it from playing the actual solid notes to playing much shorter notes. Okay, as promised, next we have the other percussion elements. So we have this glass break sound that plays every bar. And that's panned all the way to the left. Then we have a drone sound, which is very quiet, and you might not even be able to hear it in the recording. But it adds a bit more extra ambience, and it's just got its low end taken out. And then lastly, we have some more percussion loops and crashes. So it has this trap crash sample I use all the time. And then in the drops, it gets a percussion loop. And then every 2 bars, it gets, or measure, I think, it gets another percussive loop added on. And so that just adds a bit more tension into the drops. So next we have something, speaking of tension, we have the tension layer, which is just this very fast, high-pitched square, I believe? Yeah, square sound with some sawtooths added on. This is a preset made by Jovi, just titled Jovi Screech, and I added in an LFO onto it and made it play super fast 16th notes. And so that plays through the drops, through the intro, basically throughout the entire track. So it's got the bass sound, and then it's got its low end taken out, a very small amount of reverb. It's panned to the back, and it has some feedback removal. Next we have just simple downlifters, which I reversed in some places to use as risers. And those play throughout basically the entire track. Next we have something a bit more interesting. We have guitars and scream layer. So basically Jovi, who already provided to this track by making the Screech preset, also made some electric power chord samples, which I used in place of my usual synth guitars that I use. So these are basically just playing the chord progression. Speaking of the chord progression, I'll get to that later. So those play during the intros and then this bridge section, and then once at the end of the track. Anytime the guitars are not playing, except for in the intros, it's playing the Screamerizer, which is a sample I've already covered in a different track breakdown. And that's being used in the drops as, like, ambience, but at the end of every drop, I'm using it as an actual riser. So everywhere else, I have just sliced up the sample so that's only playing the beginning of it, but in the final measure, I let it play out the entire sample. Okay, next we have the choir. So the entire track is made in F harmonic minor, which is a really nice scale used for very spooky melodies and stuff. I, however, used it for the most basic chord progression I could get my hands on, which is just taking really a lot of advantage of the semitones that are involved in the F harmonic minor scale. And so it's playing a really basic chord progression. So this sound, this choir sound, I basically took it from my track Fear, which was off of my very first EP. I liked the sound of it, so I took it and I modernized it slightly by adding a few extra effects. So it's got its low and high end taken out. It's got a bit of chorus for some added width, some reverb, more low and high end taken out with a slight boost to the mids, and then volume reduced. This auto pan or panorama is taking the sound, which originally starts being panned all the way to the right in the intro, and as the chord progression plays out, it slowly starts filling out the rest of the stereo space. That's what this automation is doing. And so during the intros, it plays the full chord progression. During the drops, it plays very short notes. And then during the second drop, the notes become longer. And if you notice, that pairs with the saw layer from before. And it even pairs with the second bass. So basically everything is playing what the chords are playing during the second drop. So next we have, I've already gotten to the guitars that Jovi made. They're used in the bridge area section of the song to make like a kind of metal almost track. So we've got the typical rock drums that I've covered in many different tracks before. Playing a very slow beat, but then it starts getting some faster kicks going on. And so added on with the guitars and scream layer, we have... Oh, and the kick and snare are sidechained, so we also have that working as well. And then we have a backing guitar, which is my usual synth guitar, except it's more distorted than usual. And it's playing very low notes, and the notes it's playing are the same ones that the kicks are playing, so it matches the pattern of the kicks. And believe it or not, that's actually basically it. Though I suppose since they're here, I'll talk about the ending. So in the album, this track fades into the next track, which is End of an Era. And so it ends with the chord progression as well as a long drawn out F power chord. And then the chord slowly becomes tuned down to the scale that the End of an Era is made in, so that it can transition properly. And then these two sounds are from the next track, and they play the exact same notes that the next track starts on, therefore allowing a seamless transition. And believe it or not, that is actually the entire track. So I'll go ahead and play, let's go with the second drop. So here we go. And that's that track. So I hope you guys learned something from this. I'll be doing a few more of these track breakdowns. I have a couple more planned. In fact, one of them I'm going to be recording immediately after finishing this one. So yeah, keep your eyes out for that, and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.